Hi, I'm John Groders, and this is No Shame. What happens when you cross a good old-fashioned treasure hunt, some amazing Civil War history, and a passionate high school history teacher / basketball coach? Well, you get a hit show on History Channel, 24 million viewers strong. Today on No Shame, Brad Richards of The Curse of Civil War Gold.
Have no shame, no, we are not afraid, no shame of the gospel of his name. It's the power of God by which we all are saved. We need not be afraid. No shame.
Welcome to No Shame, and our guest today is, dare I say, History Channel megastar, Brad Richards. Brad, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here.
It's really nice of you guys to come down, and we happen to be a couple of Michigan guys, so we record this podcast in Holland, Michigan, and you are from?
Well, I'm from Muskegon County, Michigan.
Okay.
And born and raised in Michigan. Would never leave here. Thanks to the show, I've been to a lot of different places, and there's nothing like home here in Michigan.
Brad, speaking of Michigan, you mentioned another connection to the show. There's the Michigan guy is the executive producer? Or?
Yeah, the executive producer is Joe Lessard. This guy is awesome. I mean, just the easiest guy to work with, and he's from Lansing, Owasso. So, I mean, a lot of Michigan guys here.
Well, you know, you never know where a podcast can go. I'm sure some of you are listening to this while riding your camel across the Sahara, and others of you are probably in submarines somewhere in the Black Sea, and others of you be outside the studio right now listening to us. But us folks from the great state of Michigan do tend to love it, and I feel the same way. And when we live in West Michigan near the unsalted waters of the Great Lakes, it really does give us a sense of home, and I love it.
It does, and you know, there's so many cool people from Michigan. You know, one of the things that I've done for the TV show and Kevin was I do a lot of research. Sometimes that's on people, too. And when you asked me to come down here, I thought, I got to find out who this guy is. And I want to say it's it's an honor to meet you, too, and thank you for all you've done. Your works, like Tortured for Christ and these kinds of movies, these are the movies that I want to show my kids.
Oh, yeah.
And so thank you for all you do.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, that was not a paid endorsement. So, well, I appreciate that. Brad has been a show called The Curse of Civil War Gold. It's on the History Channel. It's now through season 2?
Yep, that's right. Two seasons are done.
Amazing. So we have a couple things in common, Brad. Let's just boil it down. Basketball and history. I love both of those things. Give me your connection to each of them.
Well, you know, basketball is kind of what I majored in. And
Brad is tall, by the way. He walked in the door. He was 8 inches taller than I expected. Man, he's a big guy.
Yeah, well, you know, the Lord has a way of leading people through life, and my whole family growing up was all into music and musical instruments, and it just didn't interest me at all. And I love the game of basketball. Larry Bird's my favorite player ever. And
French Lick, Indiana. He's practically a local.
Believe it or not, I took my wife to French Lick, Indiana on our honeymoon, which most people aren't real impressed with that. But
was she still married?
Yeah, still married. Okay, 26 years. She's my best friend. Excellent. And you know, we do everything together. But yeah, anyway, you know, basketball was just something I really enjoyed doing, and I always loved history. So those two things kind of go hand in hand for me. And you know, when I got into high school, I played for Coach Gorman. Ended up being like my second father. We still, you know, go out to eat today. We still hang out 40 years later, 30 years later. So, you know, then playing in college was a great experience, and I had a lot of you know, fun memories and those kinds of things. And then you get out of college, and what do? Well, I became a history teacher and a basketball coach. So, you know, 26 years later, you know, this guy, Kevin Dykstra, comes up to me and, hey, you're a history teacher, right? And I said, yep. And he said, I want to run some things past you, and you tell me if you think I'm crazy or not. And I said, you know, I'm in a real hurry. I got 5 minutes for you, man. And 2-3 hours later, I'm still sitting in his office going, whoa, this stuff is crazy. There's
Your
no
watch
way.
Broke. You couldn't time 5 minutes.
You know, because
it's like the end of a basketball game. 5 minutes can take 2 hours.
Right. You know, they have a saying in the military, there's no such thing as a coincidence.
Right.
And, you know, 26, 27, 28 coincidences later, and I just thought, my gosh, you know, Kevin is onto something here. And that was 5-6 years ago now, and I just jumped in with him and tried to help on the historical research side of everything going forward.
Well, let's get a little bit for our listeners into the bones of this story. In case you haven't seen the History Channel show, The Curse of Civil War Gold, when your friend Kevin Dykstra came to you and said, do you have 5 minutes? And what was the story he told you that got you interested?
Well, he told me about this deathbed confession and some gold in Lake Michigan. And, that's interesting. But then he thought, how could it have ended up there and not had anybody, report it? Or why isn't this discussed? And so he thought it had to have been some sort of conspiracy or cover-up. So then he tracked back, was there anybody in Muskegon connected to the Civil War and the end of the Civil War? Where would missing gold have been? And his theory was that it had to have come from the end of the Civil War. And, if you Google Confederate gold, or over 1,000 books have been written because there's just always been this mystery. Whatever happened to the gold that the South had? And
the Treasury, essentially, right? The Confederate Treasury?
The Treasury and more. You got to remember the South and the North, their paper money ended up being essentially worthless. Even today, our paper money is based on the faith that everybody has in the American government. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the Civil War, the people's faith in both governments were substantially weakened. Mm-hmm. But gold never loses its value. Mm-hmm. That's why you see these commercials on TV for gold, because if things ever did go south, you'd want to have some gold. Mm-hmm. Well, there was a lot of gold that the South had. In one book that I had, this old lady came up to Ravenna High School, where I was a teacher for 25 years. She says, I want to give you this book. Old 1863 book, you could barely read the yellow pages. And it said in that book, $56 million in bullion, gold bullion, the South had. This is a guy from the New York Times writing this book back in 1863. So where'd that all go? It went somewhere. And we've had people reach out to us and say, that gold, if there's gold in Lake Michigan, that gold would be just a tiny fraction of what actually was secreted away. Mm-hmm. And there was a group that wanted to prepare for Civil War II. There was a big group that wanted to marshal their forces. If Jefferson Davis could have gotten farther south into Mexico or west, General Kirby was still sitting over there with 60,000 Confederate soldiers. There was a plan to do that. So,
well, let's make the connection between. So we're talking about Jefferson Davis, who was History Channel.
Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederate States of America.
All right, so he's as high as you're going to get in the Confederacy, capital of Richmond, is that right?
Richmond was the capital.
So the Civil War is coming to an end. Jefferson Davis realizes that he's in danger, and does he dress as a woman and try to flee, or is that just an artifact?
So much of what we've discovered and come across, and we've met so many fascinating people, and some of those people have been in the South. And the people in the South are still very offended that you want to talk about fake news. You hear that today, fake news. And I believe our journalism is just awfully skewed today. Having said that, back in the day, the yellow journalism and the jingoistic journalism of the day was just out of control, especially by the North, but by both sides. Yeah. And so anything they could do to paint the other side. Yeah. And Jefferson Davis as being, the guys in the South that we met, you don't want to say in front of them, Jefferson Davis was dressed in women's clothes.
That makes sense.
One of the guys did that, and one of the museum curators was like, no, son.
Well, to your point, just to take a digression for a second, I've been to the Lincoln, have you been in Springfield, Illinois, the Lincoln Museum? And there's a wall there of you think that our current president gets maligned by the press, which he obviously does get maligned on a daily basis. If you think that's a recent phenomenon, read what they wrote about Abraham Lincoln in the 1860s. Yeah. It's just as brutal.
Brutal.
There's nothing off
people
limits.
Today, back in the day too, sometimes they had duels.
Right.
Let's not forget about the Burr-Hamilton duel. They took paces and turned and fired guns at each other. So the human condition is such that we all need Jesus. We all need grace. We all need forgiveness, because the natural condition of the world is to spin into chaos and disorder and negativity, and so that's why you need government systems, and that's why our government system is a blessing from above, because it's the best government system that you could possibly have, where you don't have a dictatorship or a king who just makes fiat rulings for all of us. So that's what we're trying to keep together in 2019.
It's a government that recognizes the sinful nature of humanity and therefore diversifies its authority. And it's not the government's fault when there's problems. It's that we know there are going to be problems and sinful people. So what's the best possible way to mitigate those problems? That's the beauty of a representative republic democracy. And instead of blaming the American government for the ills of slavery and broken treaties, you say, well, that's going to be the human condition, whether you're in Africa, Australia, South America, Antarctica. People are going to cheat, lie, steal, enslave one another. Within that human condition, how should one govern oneself? That's the beauty of the founders, in my opinion, too, I think.
That's right, the founders.
Well, going back to Civil War, so all right, you say, all right, the Civil War had, millions of dollars, $50 million of gold somewhere. Why would it end up in Michigan? Well, there's a legitimate connection, isn't there, between Michigan and Jefferson Davis and Irwinville, Georgia?
Yeah, Jefferson Davis was captured by the Michigan 4th Cavalry. So, you watch the show, you'll see.
Guy from Allegan, right?
Yep. General Benjamin Pritchard from Allegan was the commanding officer on the scene. I think we've done a pretty good job of piecing together how that story worked and the chain of command and the telegraph. One thing I will say is that the TV show doesn't cover all the research and all the
right. It's a TV
intricate
show.
details. It's a TV show, so if you had 5 hours to sit down, we could cover every last little piece of evidence. But no, it's been, some people have a midlife crisis. And I just feel like the Lord has blessed me with a midlife adventure.
Right.
And part of that is, I actually had to end up retiring from teaching because the school district was very kind to me and said, listen, this is awesome. You go out and have fun and good luck and, find that gold and this and that. But by season 2, they're like, okay, well.
We have a classroom sitting empty.
Right. So, one thing I've done is when we have downtime, like right now we're not filming, my heart really is with a school in Muskegon County called Calvary Christian School. And it's a mile east of the Lakes Mall. Everybody knows where the Lakes Mall is there at US 31. And our family has been so blessed. All 4 of our children have either graduated from that school or still attend. And, I just said, if there's a way I could give back somehow to the blessings I've received. And so I've been going out and actually having speaking engagements at churches.
Oh, good,
and, trying to help people become aware of the fact that, parenting today is just a challenge. There's so many things in raising children that you and I didn't have to deal with when we were growing up, and our parents didn't have to deal with, just in technology alone. And then as society crumbles, there's 3 ways to raise children, right? You got parents, the church, if you bring your kids to church, and then what are they doing from Monday through Friday? Are the influences that they're experiencing Monday through Friday, are those helping your children being raised with the values and the morals that you would have them, So we've been blessed to have our kids go to Calvary, and so I've been trying to, I think sometimes God gives us blessings in different ways, and when He does, you search for a way to, like, how can I make this work for the kingdom of the Lord? And I feel like I've been led to spread the word about this great Christian school and helping raise children for Christ.
This is the No Shame podcast, and we're with Brad Richards today. And Brad has kind of come to a certain degree of notoriety through this History Channel show called The Curse of Civil War Gold. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that storyline. But then the focus of the No Shame podcast is exactly what you're talking about, Brad, the intersection of faith and culture. History Channel is the culture part of what you're here today to discuss, and the viewership on a History Channel show is big, and there's more people that watch that show than can fit any event that you or I can speak at, which is amazing, the reach of the media and the reach of the culture. But even in your story, you're recognizing and explaining how God is using this platform through this show to allow you to express even more important things, like how to raise kids in this culture where they all have cell phones, which is this amazingly powerful, for good or for evil, tool that makes it right into their bedrooms. So you've got this culture and then this calling. and you're blending the two of them as as a coach, as a teacher, now as a television personality, and now getting a chance to go around and do podcasts and speak to people. I mean, you've been 30 miles away from me for a long time, and we would never have run into each other.
That's right.
So let me just give the listeners just a little bit more of the wrap-up of this story. Jefferson Davis is captured by guys from the Michigan Calvary.
The 4th Michigan Calvary.
And he has got a certain amount of mules with him and a certain amount of wagons with him. And tell me the story there.
All right. So Kevin discovered that there's a river crossing ferry. We went there in season 1. Where Jefferson Davis and his train, they called it a train, but it was actually a group of wagons and mules, crossed the Ocmulgee River. And 14 wagons crossed that river. And in the official reports of the Union troops, they only recovered 8 wagons, just a short couple miles down the road. So there were 6 wagons missing from the official reports. And, from there it's just exploded past that initial story. The research has gone all across the West and into secret societies such as the Masons and the Scottish Rite 33rd Degree. Actually had a chance to go tour the World Supreme headquarters of the Scottish Rite 33rd Degree Masonic Temple, which was, an experience. I'll just say that. And the Knights Templar, possibly being involved. And so, for a conspiracy of this magnitude to actually be successful and not even be talked about until 150 years later, you would need to have the ability to keep a secret. Well, if you read some of the oaths that these men take when they join these secret societies, they're not going to reveal any secrets because the consequences are too deadly. So, it's been a lot of fun, and I think that there's a lot more to go. I think that there's we've been getting people reaching out to us. I know Kevin and I both have big time, and there's more stories to research and more trails to head down. And
one connection. Tell me, this was fascinating to me because, again, I may be a little fuzzy on this, but as I understand, Jefferson Davis is captured somewhere in Georgia, right?
Irwinville,
Georgia.
There's actually a monument there, a bust of him, a statue of him there.
Now, Muskegon, Michigan is a long way from Irwinville, Georgia, but there is a connection between the two. Tell me about that.
Well, the connection is that the 4th Michigan Cavalry captured Jefferson Davis. Benjamin Pritchard and a lot of those guys were from Allegan, Michigan. You have a railroad that was started, the Lakeshore Michigan Railroad, that goes right from Allegan to Muskegon. And who were the directors of that railroad? You start finding out who the directors of the railroad were, and then who was the land commissioner. Well, Benjamin Pritchard was the land commissioner. Charles Hackley from Muskegon was the director of the railroad. Something that the TV show hasn't really covered much is there's a guy named William Montague Ferry that founded Ferrysburg and Montague.
2 cities in Michigan, by the way.
Yeah, they surround Muskegon. One in the north, one in the south. And, all these guys, you got to remember, John, this is the Gilded Age. So the Gilded Age, for those listeners that don't understand, the Gilded Age was this time in American history where you had this vast majority, maybe 97% of the American public was poor. And then you had this 3% that owned all the corporations and that owned all the businesses, and they were the gold guild over the rest of the population. It's called the Gilded Age because what was behind those rich guys were a lot of poverty and a lot of hard 12-hour day workers, And so I sometimes think that we're, I was watching Tucker Carlson on Fox News the other day, and he was talking about how the rich and the corporations and the politicians have set up this free market system, but they've kind of bastardized the system to make the point where is that a good word? Can I use that word on this podcast? Okay, to where the free market system, the rules have been changed a little bit to benefit only to where the point where we might be entering a second Gilded Age. Right. I mean, the middle class keeps paying for everything.
Right.
Paying for the illegal aliens coming across the border and the free health care and all that kind of stuff, and then paying exorbitant taxes compared to the corporations and that. And, I'm not a socialist, don't get me wrong. It's just that these two times in American history seem to be kind of similar.
Well, Teddy Roosevelt, right? He was one of the correctives of the Gilded Age, so turn of the century, 1800s, turn of the 1900s. And he says these corporations have monopolies, and they have to be addressed in order for there to be a level playing field. And now today, there's only one Google. There's only one Amazon. Mm-hmm. There's only one Facebook who owns Instagram. These are the robber baron-sized companies, whatever your position is. But you could imagine we have come to a place where there's how many media companies control all the flow of information now? It's like 4 or 5.
I agree completely.
So what Teddy Roosevelt was brought into was a time where you needed someone with his, in my opinion, his kind of courage and chutzpah, and he didn't care what anybody thought, and he addressed some of those things. Happened even 100 years before that. You know history better than I do, but when the banks became, it repeats itself. So we're back in a cycle again. This is another thing that I thought was interesting. You're talking about the railroad from Allegan to Muskegon, but didn't a railroad come all the way from Irwinville, Georgia to Michigan, or how did that railroad work?
Yes, and so what you can do is you can connect, and Kevin did a great job of doing this, even to the point of this spur in Georgia in Reconstruction. So Reconstruction was the official title of the federal government going down south and trying to rebuild the South, because the South was utterly destroyed. You have to remember, traveling through the South and doing this history project, William Tecumseh Sherman would be a war criminal today. Mm-hmm. What he did, he burned down Atlanta, and then he took a 60-mile wide swath and just burned everything in sight all the way to the sea in his march to the sea. In the history books, it talks about, this victorious campaign. The South was already destroyed when he did this. And so there's, 150 years later, you can still understand there's some bitter feelings. But Reconstruction, Georgia, back to your point. If anybody can follow my conversation, because I bounce all over, that's impressive. So, having said that, so General Wilson, who was General Pritchard's superior, right? Remember Pritchard's from Allegan, Muskegon. General Wilson was in charge of Reconstruction in Georgia. He makes sure the railroad goes right down near Irwinville, Georgia, right, and connects it all the way up to Michigan.
So this is fascinating because, again, we have a danger. Anybody who's on, I would say, a hunt for buried gold, which can be archaeology in general. If you're studying any kind of archaeology or history, the temptation is to find what you're looking for, and that may or may not help you in the search. You never know. But in this case, we know Davis was actually captured. He was actually captured by a Michigan cavalry. There was a railroad that would literally go from where he was to this place where we've brought our story, Muskegon, Michigan. And there is a park. There's a man in Muskegon, Michigan, by the name of Charles H. Hackley, who would you compare Hackley to? He was a Rothschild. He was a Roosevelt. He was a Vanderbilt of this area.
Yeah, he modeled himself after Andrew Carnegie. Right. He was an incredible philanthropist, and if you look at the value in today's money, he gave over $400 million to the city of Muskegon. Look, he did a lot of wonderful things for the city, and our only question and we've had nothing but phenomenal support from Muskegonites and people in the West Michigan area, with the exception being of like 1 or 2 people from a museum. And they had this thought that maybe we're trying to tarnish his legacy. Well, my goodness. We haven't discussed 90% of the possible tarnishment that we've gotten out of the woodwork from people, old-timers in the area, But I'm not going to cover that stuff again. But I will say this. We're not trying to say anything bad about his
Charles
legacy.
Hackley died in like 1906.
1905.
1905. So this is a long time ago we're talking about as far as legacy goes. And if you go to Muskegon today, there's Hackley Hospital, there's Hackley Museum, there's Hackley Park, there's Hackley, lots of things. His name is still all over town, right?
All over town.
Okay.
Hackley Hospital. I mean, it's just, and his original house that he built, and next to his house is Thomas Hume, his partner, Hackley and Hume. They were both incredible millionaires. They're restored to the day that they were built, and they're gorgeous and beautiful. We've gotten the tours, and busloads of people go through there and check it out. And actually, the county has reached out to us and said, hey, thank you.
You're bringing back the story. Right. He had a bank, right? It was he had his own bank, and he printed money with his own name on it. Is that true?
I have purchased myself at auctions 5 different denominations. Old bills, And right there, Charles Hackley, National Bank, and then he signs it.
$10.
Prints his own money.
So this connection, again, if you would go to Muskegon, Michigan today, we were just talking about William Tecumseh Sherman, you can visit a park called Hackley Park. And there are, I haven't seen this, and I'm going to go see it as soon as I can, but there are 4 statues on the corner of this block. Can you tell me who those statues are?
Is this trivia questions now,
Well,
John?
no. This is me getting Sherman into Muskegon. This is I've got a reason.
I most certainly can because I grew up right there.
Right, you know this stuff.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm just messing with you, but in fact, one of them is Admiral Farragut, who President Trump mentioned in his July 4th address. Admiral Farragut said, "Damn the torpedoes." Full speed ahead.
I thought that was Tom Petty. I guess that's different. All right.
And then William Tecumseh Sherman is there. In fact, when we were doing the filming, one of the camera guys said to me quietly on the side, "That guy's a war criminal, wasn't he?" Mm-hmm. That's where I actually got that first thought from. I'll say this, too. Just a little quick side note. The people that I've met from Hollywood and California, you have these preconceived notions. They've all been very, very nice people. I mean, quality people.
Yeah.
And it's just been a blessing to meet all those kinds of people, too. And, actually, a few of them on the side have told me, "Hey, Brad, you're not afraid. You're unashamed about being a Christian and saying that, you're following Christ the best you can. And keep it up, would you please?
Good.
Because we need more of the people like that." And that's just, that's an encouragement.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the other 2 statues are Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
And then
Grant.
Ulysses S. Grant, who we were in Washington, D.C. filming. Have you seen the incredible monument to Grant outside the Congress building? Oh, you got to go see it. Washington, D.C. is an amazing place, and I'm going to bring my family back again. I actually we got this old Class C, family vacation motorhome. Yeah. And, there's an RV, and people actually have made memes about that with me. They're not complimentary. But drove right past the White House, and I thought later, I probably had like a RPG aimed at me at that time. Yeah, I didn't. Right. But no, and then after President McKinley was assassinated, then Charles Hackley, he was actually the first person to build a statue to President McKinley, and that sits outside the Hackley Administration Building, which is a huge old building where he built a school. And then Lady Liberty stands in the middle, 57 feet high. It's just an incredibly gorgeous historical site,
This is all available for you today to take your RV2 to Muskegon, Michigan, and see these monuments.
A lot of people are doing that. It's a beautiful place. It's got multiple lakes.
But it does establish, so this is not conjecture anymore. There is a connection between Charles Hackley, the Andrew Carnegie of Muskegon, Michigan, the Allegan, cavalry that captured Jefferson Davis, a railroad that goes straight to Irwindale, and then these monuments that show Hackley's interest and involvement in the things of the Civil War: Sherman, Lincoln, Grant, Farragut. So these things are. This is all back to the question of how that 5-minute talk with you turned into 2 hours. These are the kind of things that lined up for you enough to say, "Tell me more."
That's right. And then, at some point, I just said, "Hey, yeah, I'll help you on this." And Kevin said, "All right." And, it's just been a lot of fun. We've traveled across the country. We've spent a lot of time all together, and the other guys on the show are quality guys. I mean, his brother Al has become one of my best friends. And Jeff Zier and I have been friends for, more than a decade. Jeff Zier's on the school board at Calvary Christian School, where my kids go to school. And I coached his daughters in basketball. So, I mean, we've been friends forever. And then Frederick J. Monroe is, some people find him to be the biggest character on the show. And I'll just tell you, he's got a heart of gold. That Unity Christian Music Festival? He goes up there and he works in the prayer tent. If anybody wants to come pray,
nice.
Frederick's in the prayer tent, willing to pray. And last year he prayed over my daughter because she had an injury. I mean, these are quality guys, and it's just been a blessing to work with them. And so you've got 2 seasons of production, 20 episodes, is that right? 16 episodes.
16 episodes. So tell me what it's like to be involved in the production of a reality show. What's your role, and how does the day come together, and how many camera guys are following you around, and how do you get mic'd up, and all those kind of things?
Yeah, well, you'll never watch TV the same again.
Right. Right.
All I can tell you is that, there's cameras around. You get mic'd up. so that they can hear you when you talk. Most people don't have that problem with me. In fact, I get told to be quiet a little bit. I can't help it. I'm half deaf, and I've been a coach for 25 years, and I just,
Do they give you a whistle on the show? Are you allowed to blow a whistle?
No, but I get dirty looks here and there when I'm talking too loud. But anyway, no, it's, and there's people there to help. It's, they make you feel kind of special, like you're, a part of something important. There's usually a head person or two that's kind of directing where to go. They don't tell us what to do, what to say, where to go. That's all what we want to do. If anything, they slow us down a little bit. But I understand that's part of the deal. But yeah, it's been quite an experience. Something that I never thought that I would experience back in the day, and I do consider it a blessing. I will say sometimes the days get long. And sometimes if you stumble or stammer through your words, you got to do things again.
Well, the show, as a producer myself, I will say the show is so well produced, and my kudos and congratulations to that production quality. I know what it takes to put those kind of programs together, and I'm going to watch more of the episodes, Brad. After meeting you today, I've watched just a little bit of them, but I can already just vouch for it's well done. It's paced quickly. They know what makes good television. You guys are interesting and authentic and real. The story is just enough to kind of bridge this gap between, we're all interested in a treasure hunt. That's been age old story, and this is a legitimate treasure hunt. But I want to talk about history for a minute because I'm, like I said at the start, you're interested in basketball and history. I would add music. Apparently, you won't go there, but I like basketball. And history has got to change from when we were young. And we unfortunately had to sit through history class in school with people like you, making us read a textbook, and it wasn't a real thing. I said, Brad, I did a short 2-part documentary series in Rome in 2001 with a guy named Arthur Caliandro, who was the senior pastor of the Marble Collegiate Church in New York City, the oldest church in the country, the oldest really the oldest corporation in America was the church system in New Amsterdam, the collegiate church system. So anyway, he's a part of this Fifth Avenue big church, and he took a group of people to Italy, and I went with some cameras and we documented the trip, and he gave comments at the end of the day. It's beautiful. I came back and told my wife, Judy, I believe in history for the first time in my life. Because I hadn't been to Rome before that. I hadn't been into those. And I said, those people, they really lived. They really seemed to think they would last forever. They had air conditioning. They made ice cream. They had internal plumbing. That was a culture that didn't see itself as temporary. Up till now, all it's been is black and white pictures in a textbook. And then you get to the next level where it's not a subject anymore. I wish there was a better word for it. It's history. It's real people who lived real lives and left real legacies, which we stand upon. Somewhere that must have transitioned for you.
Yeah, big time.
From a subject.
Yeah, and like my family, we go visit museums when we go on vacation because I'll tell you this, what I've always told my classes at school, too, is that history is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
You guys sitting in your basement playing these dumb video games, which is, such a waste of time. Real people lived back then, and they did real things, and fascinating what happened throughout history. And I'll tell you, I've even had parents say to me, well, why do we got to even learn history? Well, because if you don't learn history, you're destined to repeat the mistakes of the past.
Right.
And you see that happen throughout history over and over again. The cycle of mankind, we already talked about it. So, one thing that I had a pastor, Pastor Rudd, for 25 years, and one thing that he said that always stuck with me, only one life will soon be passed. Only what's done for Christ will last. And, yeah, I look at these guys that lived in the 1800s after the Civil War. They knew that death was around the corner during the Civil War. But, you had both sides, the North and the South. They had these huge prayer meetings. Come to Jesus, because you're going to go out there and march at each other and then get point-blank range and everybody fires.
Yeah.
It was the most awful war in our nation's history was the Civil War. 700,000 men died. But anyway, the guys that lived past that and the powerful people, these high-degree Scottish Rite Masons and this and that, kind of reminded me of what you just said about the Romans. They built this incredible infrastructure just for themselves sometimes. And it was the philanthropy of these huge buildings was awesome for the society, but you just wondered. I always wondered to myself, at what point did they realize I'm not going to make it anymore? You know, I'm on my deathbed here, and what did I do? What was my life all about? And you know, that's my biggest fear in life, is going through life and not having done what God wanted me to do. I mean, if that doesn't give you pause, then you're living in the moment and watching TV and playing video games, and you're not, you know, maybe you're stressed out with your job and things are bothering you, and you know, Facebook consumes, you know, what is everybody else doing? Look at them, they're having more fun than me, and this and that. And there's so many distractions in life, and you know, I think it's important that we all look in the mirror sometimes and say, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? You know, am I following what I'm supposed to be doing with my life? Because it's not going to be here forever, you know?
This is the No Shame Podcast. I'm John Groders. Our guest today is Brad Richards, like I said, History Channel megastar from the Curse of the Civil War, the Curse of Civil War Gold. And as we look at history, whether we look at the Roman era, whether we look at the mighty power of Egypt in the time of Moses and the Exodus, whether we look at the life of Christ, whether we look at the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, the Enlightenment period, whether we go into the American Revolution, the American Experiment, the Founding Fathers, which is a time period that I'm very, very fascinated with. I was just having a conversation before you got here today about a movie that we may or may not get involved with on the life of Payne Stewart. Payne Stewart was a famous golfer and a very interesting and wonderful man.
Airplane crash.
He died in an airplane where everyone fell asleep in the airplane. They had a carbon monoxide thing.
Yeah.
So Keith Mitchell and I were just discussing today, there was a time in that airplane where Payne Stewart knows this is his last moments of life. What goes through your head? What are the things that exactly the question that you just raised? What have we done with our lives? And at that moment, are we going to remember the trophies? Payne Stewart won 3 golf majors. You know, is that the thing, or is what he did for Christ? That's what's going to come out, because the next step, the next door, he's going to pass. He's going to go to a new home, and that's going to be the question. When you study history like you do, you realize one thing about history: every single character you study has walked through that phase of life, and
That's right.
We have not.
They've walked through that phase of life, and you realize it's going to happen to you. And I tell you, whenever I make a mistake, or you know, Lord knows I'm not perfect, and that's why, you know, none of us are perfect parents. That's why I really have been blessed with the Calvary Christian School helping me raise my children, so that they realize that, you know, hey, we're only here for a little while. You know, what are you going to do with your life? But they've all looked at that, and we don't. We get to the point where we're just so caught up in our day-to-day busyness that we all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it was 10 years ago when that picture happened. What have I done in the last 10 years? And you know, my dad just passed away, and they asked me to speak at the funeral. And one thing that my dad, first of all, he was he meant everything to me, and he woke up every morning and he said, you know what? He said a prayer. What would you have me to do today, Lord? I don't know. I don't know if I could ever match that, but I'll just say he had it figured out. And I'll tell you, we need people like that are older than us and that are role models for us. We all do. You, John, you do. I do. And he was one for me. And you look at the breakdown in the family of today's society, and unfortunately, we have so many kids that they are not getting role models or parenting that is doing anything other than the parents are very busy and they're too distracted with their own stuff to, you know, bother to discipline or raise and spend time with their kids. And then when they have trouble at school, and being a public school teacher for 25 years, I can tell you, the parents don't usually blame their children or give responsibility for their children when the children have trouble with their grades or their behavior. The parents blame the school. And that's where we're at today in society. And it's just it's something that we need to be aware of and really try to counteract.
So we're talking with Brad Richards from the history show Curse of Civil War Gold, which is a show about basically seeking out buried treasure. It's a 2-season-long exploration of what happened to these millions of dollars of Confederate gold. But here I am talking to you, and clearly the Bible verse is just screaming in my head, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. You haven't spent 1 second of this show telling me about the gold or what it's going to pay off or anything. That apparently is not where, as interesting as it is, and you've thrown yourself into 2 seasons and you've been extraordinarily complimentary with the crew and the cast and the guys you're working with. But it seems to me that you are saying to me, as clear as day, my treasure is in the legacy I leave for the Lord, through my children, through my life. That's where I want my heart to be. Am I reading you right?
That's where my heart is. I mean, my heart is in my family and trying to do the right thing for the Lord. I mean, my treasure is my wife and Joy, and then my kids, Taylor and Allison and Kelsey and Bradley Jr. They mean the world to me. To whom much is given, much is required.
Yeah.
And, philanthropy by Charles Hackley 150 years ago, that was good stuff. I tried to say to people in Muskegon, and they understand this. I don't care how he got the money. He still did great things with the money for the people. He gave it away. So, we're not trying to tarnish anybody's legacy. But, yes, my heart, you've read me. That's just, I don't know. It's fun to be a part of a treasure hunt. If we were very successful, it'd be awesome. Most important to me is family, faith, and we've won a lot of basketball games at Calvary too. And you're a basketball fan, and you were talking to me about that before the show started. And we still coach basketball the same way. When we're in the film room or the TV room, we've got great coaches, Dan Hamilton, and, these guys have been with me forever, Jim Warren and stuff. And we talk to the kids. Listen, there's nothing to be nervous about for tonight's game. They're starving people in Ethiopia. The Lord has big plans for you after you get out of high school. Tonight, you get a chance to compete.
Right.
Thank God for this chance.
Amen.
Go out there and do your best, and you got a chance to win. But when it's all said and done, remember what you said about Payne Stewart's trophies. It's temporal. So you got to keep everything in mind. Well, Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. And, that's just really important for everybody.
Well, if you're listening to the podcast today, the No Shame Podcast with Brad Richards, I always know when we have these discussions that there's something in it for some of the people who are listening. We don't plan it ahead, but what is out of this conversation today for you? What's your legacy? What is the history that will be written about your life? Where is your treasure in life? Are you going to be living life with regrets if you were to make it to your final deathbed? Or would you be able to say, I have run the race and I have completed the journey? And these are the questions that can be raised when you study history and when you study massive movements. You used the phrase in one of your quotes, you said that this project came along and divine providence played a part in me being a part of this. I am grateful to be a part of this project. Divine providence. It's not a term we use anymore, but they used it a lot in centuries past. Divine providence. What is that?
Divine providence means that God is in control of all of us, whether we acknowledge it or not. And, Kevin knows that I'm thankful to him for including me in this project. And the Lord knows that I'm thankful to him too, because it's allowed me to meet awesome people like you and have a tremendous amount of experiences that never would have happened before. And so it was no great credit to me or anything special I've done that had me be a part of this project. It's just I'm very thankful for divine providence.
Well, that's Kevin Dykstra that you're talking about, and Kevin was kind of the guy that asked for 5 minutes of your time and kind of brought the party to you. And watch The Curse of Civil War Gold. You can see it on History Channel. You can see it online, and go to a Calvary Christian School basketball game next year and watch the coach and check out if his language is appropriate or not.
Well, you can come say hi to me, and I'm also a licensed realtor. My wife and I got invested in houses at a young age, thanks to my dad, and now I'm just I'm a licensed realtor and I'm helping people, and it's been a lot of fun. I'll tell you what, is there ever a day goes by if you don't help somebody, you feel good about that? Or I should say this: if you help somebody, you feel good about that. You go through a day and you haven't helped anybody, and all you think about is yourself. It's usually an unhappy day. Right. So I've been helping people with real estate too.
And if you find your way to Muskegon, Michigan, there's some monuments and museums and parks, and you can also look into the history of the Curse of Civil War gold. Thank you for being our guest today, Brad. It's been fascinating to meet you.
Oh, it's been my blessing, and John, keep doing the great work that you do too.
Amen. Thank you for listening.
Have no shame, no, we are not afraid, no shame of the gospel of his name. It's the power of God by which we all are saved. We need not be afraid.
No Shame is a weekly podcast where John Groders discusses life at the intersection of faith and culture with all kinds of interesting and inspiring guests. Subscribe to the podcast today by going to johngroders.com, select the podcast tab, and hit subscribe. Listen whenever you have time, but don't miss any of these life-giving conversations.